Welcome back to New Rockstars. I'm Erik Voss, and this is a breakdown of House of the Dragon Season 2, Episode 6. We are going to cover all the details you missed, the deeper layers of meaning, and changes from the book. But for any spoilers for upcoming plot events that we know from Fire and Blood, those are going to be at the end of this video in the spoiler dungeon. And before we get started, a reminder that the best way to support New Rockstars is with one of our House of the Dragon inspired shirts available at nerdriot.shop. All right, let's get started. We now get some changes to the opening Tapestry imagery after Vhagar eating Arrax and Luke above Shipbreaker Bay, and the death of young Prince Jaehaerys, and the hanging of the rat catchers. We arrive at the aftermath of the Battle of Rook's Rest from episode 4. We start by seeing two figures who are bloody and on fire beside the tail of a dragon. These could be any of the soldiers from the defending Stauntons, the Blacks, or Ser Criston's combined coalition, the Hightowers, the Rosbys. But then onto two others who are also bloody and dismembered, one from each side as well, and then a wide shot of Sunfire on the left, Meleys on the right, Vhagar flying above, and someone in the middle raising this sword above the head. Sunfire is woven with colors closer to his description of the book, golden scales but bright pink membranes. The pink didn't really come through in the CGI render on the show. At first I thought the figure in the middle might be Aemond, standing over the charred body of his brother Aegon, raising his sword to finish the job, as Ser Criston witnessed. But we must remember these tapestries do not show history exactly as it happened, but rather the legend that would get entered into the historical record based on whatever biased source decides to weave this tapestry. And according to legend and the propaganda that was spread about this battle by the Greens, King Aegon was the hero of the battle. They said it was a clash between Sunfire and Meleys that Aegon, through the grace of the gods, walked away from, and that Vhagar just kind of kept her distance. So I think this part of the tapestry is showing King Aegon raising his sword Blackfire over the corpse of Rhaenys beside her felled dragon Meleys, as Vhagar is just patrolling from afar, even cut off by the frame, suggesting that these weavers were told to downplay Vhagar in the record of this event. And the head of Meleys oozes black fluid through the broken bodies from both sides toward the Iron Throne. This fluid could be the hot oil that the dragons use to produce their flames, which we saw bleeding from Meleys' neck in episode 4 as Vhagar bit it, also spilling from Sunfire to burn the soldiers on the ground. But the way this blackness spreads toward the throne reminds me of the spreading influence of the Black faction in this episode in particular, as bastards like Addam of Hull successfully bond with dragons, proving to be a stronger path to power than the official ancestry. The spilling black ink stains of this tapestry, while messier, are a more accurate reflection of how history and reality really unfold. So we open on the forces of House Lannister galloping up to the Golden Tooth. The Golden Tooth is a seat of House Lefford, with a sigil of this yellow triangle and a golden sun against a blue sky. They are sworn to House Lannister, and in season 1 episode 9 we learn that they swore allegiance to King Aegon II and the Greens. The Golden Tooth overlooks the passage between the Westerlands and the Riverlands, so strategically you could say it's kind of similar to what the twins were to Jace in episode 5, as the link from the north to the Riverlands needed for the Starks to get through. Though we should note that the Golden Tooth is really like a watchtower over the road. It's far less of a practical bottleneck, because you literally have to walk through the castles of the twins and the bridge to get over that river. But if you listen closer to the music, it's a familiar tune. Yes, that is the melody of the Reigns of Castamere, the Lannister song, though we should note that that song would not be composed yet at this point in history, not until like 130 years after this point in Westerosi history, when Tywin Lannister, yes, that Tywin from the Game of Thrones era, obliterated House Rhaen, which was then immortalized in this song. We should note that the Green's Kingsguard, Martin Rhaen, comes from this family, and I think the mob licks that lickspittle. So maybe we could say that the Reigns of Castamere music is playing for him. Jefferson Hall, who has played the snobby yet more cautious Master of Coin, Tywin Lannister on the Green Council, also plays his twin Jason Lannister, the snobby but more assertive brother. We saw both brothers last season together in the Hunt episode and at Rhaenyra's wedding to Laenor. The gate to the Golden Tooth is marked by these two boulders carved to look like two big old teeth painted to be gold, but the paint is chipping because they aren't that rich here at this castle. Lord Humphrey Lefford rides out to greet Jason Lannister, promising 500 of his own knights to join Jason's 1,000 knights. Plus he says 7,000 more archers and men-at-arms. Lord Humphrey notices the lions in cages, which is definitely something the Lannisters love to do. Kind of like, you know, LSU bringing tigers to football games. But in this context, it's kind of like the Lannisters are pretending to be Targaryens by having their own hulking family beasts at their sides. But the way dragons have been drains on resources in this season, Lord Humphrey is worried about the same with these lions and with all 8,000 of these men. He suggests, hey, why don't we, you know, move this party to Harrenhal? But Jason says to tell King's Landing that they aren't going anywhere until Aemond and Vhagar Vhagar arrived to protect them. Yes, like Lady Jane at the Vale and the Freys at the Twins, no one in Westeros wants to move or commit to anything ever since Rook's Rest, and they want to be sure any dragons in the skies are protecting them. Now, this message was supposed to go to Tyland Lannister, but now we see it being read by Prince Regent Aemond, meaning that Tyland reported this to Aemond verbally, and Aemond was like, he said, "What? Let me see that letter." And now Aemond is reading it himself, taking particular umbrage at the words "with haste." Tyland avoids eye contact here, sitting in the same Master of Coin seat formerly occupied by Lyman Dear Me Beesbury, who was offed via attendance ball, a decision that also comes back to haunt the Greens in this episode. Alicent tries to advise.
Your irritations are justified, Aemond, but it does seem...
I have a task for you as well, Sir Darklyn.
Yes, Aemond fully ignores his mother and calls Tyland Sir Tyland. As he is a knight, he's not the lord of his family, but calling him this does put Tyland in his place as a knight to be deployed on tasks and not like a department head to report updates to him. Aemond wants to bypass the blockade and the gullet by forming an alliance with the Triarchy. The Triarchy, remember, is a sort of pirate fleet formed by an alliance of the free cities Myr, Lys, and Tyrosh. This fleet was led at the time by Kragus the Crab Feeder in season 1, but they were defeated by Daemon on Caraxes, Leonor on Seasmoke, and Corlys's fleet in the Stepstones. Alicent asks about the Greyjoys instead.
The Red Kraken waits, seeking his best advantage.
And Ironrod suggests to offer Alicent to this kid in marriage. So the Red Kraken is Dalton Greyjoy, who is referenced by Orwyle in the first episode of this season. He's a 16-year-old killer who carries a Valyrian steel sword that he calls Nightfall that he ripped off the corpse of a Corsair, and he tires of women quickly. The character has not been cast for this season, so I don't think we're gonna see him maybe until season 3, or maybe we're just gonna hear about his exploits from other characters in scenes like this. Alicent shoots down Ironrod's idea.
Out of the question.
Alas.
Yeah, notice how Ironrod's eyes dart over to Criston in this moment. Aemond circles the table in a game of duck, duck, goose where no one wants to be called on. And then when Criston agrees with Alicent that they shouldn't invite the Triarchy into their waters, Aemond now sits on the table beside Criston in this kind of Bill Lumbergh type of way. And he turns his back to the rest of them and he speaks quietly, ordering Criston to march back up through the Riverlands to Harrenhal.
We lost much at Rook's Rest, as you all know.
And Sir Criston gives Aemond this specific cutting look, indicating, I saw how far you went with your brother, the king. But Aemond, just sitting in this way, is trying to appeal to Sir Criston as they were back when they were in Aemond's chamber in season 2, episode 1, placing coins on the map, charting their takeover of the Riverlands. And he uses this softer, almost apologetic tone, as if to say, look, bro, I know I overstepped, and I forced us to retreat to King's Landing to return the wounded king, but come on, man, let's just finish what we started here. So he says that they're gonna try to come at Harrenhal to come from the west with Jason Lannister's forces and the east with Sir Criston's forces, and then join with Vhagar when the time is ripe. What a word to use in an episode where everyone is starving. And he says he welcomes the challenge from his uncle Daemon if he dares to face him. We're gonna talk more about all these troop movements down in the spoiler dungeon. But whereas Aegon would scream and shout at these small council meetings, Ewan Mitchell reduces Aemon's lines to just this icy whisper, especially with his mother.
Been a counselor to Aegon.
Capably so. Father's dead. Aegon is...
And by doing this, he contrasts Alicent's description of his actions as bold and reckless and immature, so that she really knows that his dismissal of her from the small council is not the result of a temper tantrum. He has calculated this. He says that he wants his mother to focus on more domestic concerns, which he pauses before saying it's not just a sexist, diminishing thing to say to his mother. I think he's also referring to what's really going on with her and Sir Criston. But she holds his face to get a good look at his scar. I think Alicent's issue is that she sees him as the boy who was mocked with the pink dread pig, who struggled during sparring sessions, whose eye was slashed out. But while her first son will always be a mama's boy who cries mommy, Aemond has, to use Maester Aemond's words from Game of Thrones, killed the boy and let the man rise. He sees all temperance as a weakness. Aemond understands that this is now a dance of dragons, really a battle of gods, not a battle among those who pray to gods. I'm not saying he's right, this is just how he views all of this. And yes, I love to point out that this is a quiet exchange with no witnesses, as this isn't really a characterization for Alicent that's described anywhere in Fire and Blood. At this point in history, she's really just sidelined from the story, so I love that we get these little character moments from her. Corlys joins the Black Council's painted table, and he pauses for a moment beside the part of the table that Rhaenys used to occupy, and then he fastens the Hand of the Queen pin, and Rhaenyra just kind of gives him a nod, but she sees this pin, and relief washes over her face. But she doesn't say anything, it's just kind of like, hey, glad you could make it, moving on. In Fire and Blood, they have it out over Rhaenys' death. He actually initially screams at her, "It should have been you!" But they bring in Ser Steffon Darklyn, whose home at the Dunfort was just sacked in episode 4, and in Fire and Blood, it is Ser Steffon, not Sir Erik, who brings Viserys' crown to Dragonstone. Rhaenyra says that they need dragon riders for Vermithor, Silverwing, and Seasmoke, and she does not mention any other dragons, but there are several more options in the Dragonmont and just generally around Dragonstone in Fire and Blood, which I break down in this video, but this line makes it seem like these are the only 3 unclaimed dragons on Dragonstone that we're gonna see in this season. We do get a hint at a 4th one in the Vale area. But a reminder that Seasmoke was Corlys and Rhaenys' son Leonor's dragon, Vermithor was the bronze dragon that was previously written by Jaehaerys I, aka Jaehaerys the Conciliator, and Silverwing was the dragon of his wife, Alicent, both of which we have been seeing in the opening Tapestry art. Ser Steffon brings up Rhaena as a possible rider, reminding us that she is still currently without a dragon in the Vale, at least for now, but Rhaenyra suggests that Ser Steffon be their rider, and my favorite named character, Bartimos Celtigar, looks up suspiciously, just priming that face for a slap later. Rhaenyra produces a scroll, one of the genealogical records from the shelves at the end of episode 5, and she says that Ser Steffon's grandmother's grandmother, Arianna, was born a Targaryen princess. So this whole idea of Arianna Darklyn or an Arianna Targaryen is not in the book. They made it up for the show. And it seems like they added this ancestry to try to justify the disastrous attempt to bond Steffon with Seasmoke in Fire and Blood. I mean, we would be talking about at least 6 generations back. That's about as many generations as we are into this Targaryen dynasty on Westeros. Like, Aegon the Conqueror was Daemon's grandfather's grandfather. So Rhaenyra would be reaching further back in genealogical ancestry history than like Eddard Stark in his ardent research into the Baratheon and Lannister lines to prove that Joffrey was a bastard. So at most, Ser Steffon is like 164th Valyrian blooded, which would not be enough to qualify him for any Valyrian scholarships. Obviously, the smarter move would just be to track down more recently born bastards. But for now, Rhaenyra is making the mistake of assuming dragons care about noble-born Valyrians, because she was raised by Viserys to care about proper lineages and legal heirs to stay in accordance with Aegon the Conqueror's Song of Ice and Fire. But she missed the part where Viserys told her that dragon power itself is an illusion. Time and time again, these things have been wild beasts guided by other instincts. Ser Steffon is also a victim of this superstition.
I am but a man. The dragons are gods.
The small folk in King's Landing also consider the dragons gods, and they saw beheaded Meleys as a bad omen, but remember, Hugh Hammer saw Meleys as just meat. I think everyone is better off seeing these creatures as they are. Daemon the Dreamer finds himself in another vision inside the Red Keep, but this time instead of young Rhaenyra on the throne, it is Paddy Considine returning as his brother Viserys I.
Did you say it? The heir for a day.
This is a recreation of their fight back in the very first episode of the series. After Viserys' wife Aemma died in childbirth with baby Balon, Daemon was out drinking with the Gold Cloaks, but the scene cut away from him before we saw whether or not he actually said the words heir for a day. That rumor of him saying Balon was heir for a day was reported by Otto Hightower, but Daemon never fully denied it in his fight with Viserys. And clearly he is guilty for his brother dying thinking he did say it. And that fight was where Viserys decided to name a new heir, Rhaenyra. So we could even say that fateful decision to say heir for a day, or even just to deny it to his brother, was really what led to the conflict now. But whereas that previous version of the scene was lit with warm color tones and torchlight, this version of the scene is colder and bluer. Viserys was mourning in the previous version of the scene. Now he leans forward in accusatory rage. That scene ended with Viserys leaning back on the Iron Throne and cutting his finger, which was, remember, the first of 1,000 cuts as his body would erode throughout the season. Now when he leans back in the throne, he doesn't wince in pain for being cut. He just kind of takes off his crown in anger, because the ghost version of Viserys can never die. Viserys holding Blackfire now makes him look like the judgment of the entire family is weighing upon Daemon. He is locked in the throne room, but he can never himself ascend the throne. It's a form of hell torturing him with the various sins he has committed throughout the series, but never owned up to, because the HBO series editing conveniently would cut away from whatever he really said. This is totally Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol, right? Ghosts of Daemon past and present are haunting him. Actually, Sir Simon reminds me of the ghost of Christmas Present, with his jolly stature and his constant feasting. I guess that could make Alys Rivers as the ghost of Christmas Future. Some of you pointed out how in episode 5, when Sir Simon came in to report the news from Stonehenge, Alys walked behind Sir Simon and disappeared out of frame. Now, I think that was just kind of a trick of the eye, where one actor just walks back further and further away from the camera, perfectly blocked by a foreground subject, kind of like that woman vanishing behind Scarlett Johansson on the red carpet in that Glitch of the Matrix video that always goes around. Some have even thought that Alys might have been completely in Daemon's imagination, but in this episode, Sir Simon mentions their healer, and Lara Strong references her in a scene we're definitely going to talk about later. But Daemon's reaction to this spooky phenomena makes him closely to Shakespeare's Macbeth, right? He's haunted by the ghost of Banquo and floating daggers while seeking the counsel of witch figures who lead him down paths of poetic justice. Daemon snarls at Sir Simon.
Perhaps the culprit has been tampering with my peace.
Yeah, he says peace as in P-E-A-C-E, but when they first met, Daemon did think that the Strongs were poisoning his peas, P-E-A-S. Daemon hurries out to Caraxes past the Harrenhal Godswood, and the dragon is directly facing the Weirwood tree. So these two crimson supernatural representations of gods are just spending all night trying to figure each other out. Daemon passes Alys, who stands in this garden, head raised, eyes closed. I wonder if in this moment she could be using her warg abilities to see through the eyes of an animal. Maybe even that owl who flaps up to her later. Or maybe just doing what she hinted at last episode, sensing her news from the wind and communicating through the branches of the Weirwood tree. Daemon finally realizes he's been drugged, but Alys speculates.
Ghost of Harren the Black moaning his curses from Kingspire Tower?
Drivel! All of it!
Caraxes cries at this last suggestion, implying he might agree with it. Maybe after spending all night gossing with that magic tree. Now, if Alys is 400 years old, was Alys there to see Harren the Black die when Balerion torched the Kingspire Tower? Have all the ghost stories about Harrenhal over the years come from her drugging the occupants and making sure the Weirwood trees continue to grow through the castle? Alys says,
There are older things in this world than you or I or living memory.
This might be my favorite line of the series so far. The older things than you or I or living memory refers to the godly forces that control the nature of Westeros. This season we've seen how these old gods are using Alys as a mouthpiece, and they're trying to steer Daemon back to a sense of conscience. Similarly, the dragons answer to natural forces and instincts beyond our understanding, and they do not care about our current laws or our politics. At this point in Daemon's path, he has allowed the undergrowth of the densest terrain of Weirwoods to take root in him and to reveal in him as yet another chess piece. Eric and Arik were knights, Rhaenys was a rook, Daemon wants to have the power of a queen, but he has the limited movement of a king. And now this bishop, Alys, with a glimpse into the divine, is offering him a clearer, long-range diagonal view of the board. Because whereas most chess pieces are only able to look like one space or multiple spaces ahead of or to their side, only bishops and the queen are able to see diagonally, and depending on where you are in the board, that can be the longest distance across the board. Alys says that maybe Viserys gave the crown to Rhaenyra because those who strive for it are the least suited to wear it, and that Viserys didn't want the crown himself. We actually saw that decision at the Great Council of 101 in this same location at Harrenhal in the opening scene of the series. And she says that it's not a prize to be won, but a burden to bear. Caraxes is totally hooting in the background for all of this, and it's just a clue that this also applies to the right to ride a dragon. Those who pursue it too thirstily as a prize, like Ser Steffon does, get burned, while those who don't expect it, Addam of Hull and Rhaena, are going to be saddled with that burden. And yes, the owl flaps up to Alys and she feeds it some rodent guts that she'd been carrying loose in her pocket. This probably was the owl that she was talking about back in episode 4.
I'm no woman at all. I'm a barn owl, cursed to live in human form.
So Alys promises that the winds will shift in 3 days' time, and what's required of Daemon is to do nothing, similar to what Alicent told Aegon he would have to do as a good king, and what Aemond tells Alicent she has to do now. At the Dragonmont, we hear the Dragonkeepers sing. Ooh, this is the same Valyrian lullaby that Daemon was singing back in the season 1 finale to Vermithor. The series language expert David J. Peterson said that this song is called Haros Bartosi. The words were written by Ty Michael, who's George R. R. Martin's assistant and a consultant to House of the Dragon, and David J. Peterson translated the lyrics to Valyrian. The words translate to fire breather, winged leader, but 2 heads to a 3rd sing, from my voice the fires have spoken, and the price has been paid with blood magic, with words of flame, with clear eyes, to bind the 3, to you I sing, as one we gather, and with 3 heads we shall fly as we were destined, beautifully, freely. Ooh, there is all kinds of meaning that we can derive from this. With 3 heads, of course, refers to the Targaryen sigil, the 3-headed dragon, representing the dragons ridden by Aegon, Visenya, and Rhaenys. Balerion, Vhagar, and Meraxes respectively. But this is also reflected in the Game of Thrones era, the prophecy that Daenerys repeats, the dragon has 3 heads. The lyric of "the fires have spoken and the price has been paid with blood magic with words of flame and clear eyes," referring to the doom of Valyria. The fires have spoken being the 14 flames that erupted and destroyed Valyria. The price has been paid with blood magic, referring to the blood mages who first used human sacrifices to bind the dragons to humans, which we see as the very first depiction of the opening tapestry. Clear eyes, referring to Coach Eric Taylor, but also to Daenerys the Dreamer, who foresaw the doom of Valyria so this family could escape to Dragonstone and exist to the present day. And now it's Rhaenyra trying to keep those clear eyes with Aegon's dream, her entire motivation for waging this war and trying to expand their dragon power, as she's now doing. Now, Daemon did sing this song to calm Vermithor, but we're still waiting to see what happened in that scene. Was Daemon secretly bonding with Vermithor, which could totally alter Rhaenyra's plans to bond another rider to Vermithor in coming episodes? Or was that just meant to show that Rhaenyra's faction has access to bigger dragons than we had seen throughout season 1? But either way, they're now using this song to calm Seasmoke, Laenor's dragon, whom we saw on the Stepstones in season 1 and has been circling Dragonstone and flying over Addam of Hull on Driftmark ever since. As Ser Steffon waits for Seasmoke, he whispers the Valyrian commands these Dragonkeepers had taught him, including the word Delhires, which means obey. He kind of sounds like Indiana Jones right before the first test in Last Crusade.
The penitent man will pass. Penitent man will pass.
But wind blows a Dragonkeeper's torch. The winds are shifting, as Alys Rivers would say, and we stare at the smoke in the cave, trying to make out any figure through the gloom. But then from this darkness appears Seasmoke. One of the keepers says, "Likiri," which means calm. This actually was the magic word that Aemond said to Vhagar to get her to let him mount her on Driftmark in episode 7 of last season. Ser Steffon just exclaims, "Gods," which comes out kind of like just an expression of someone who follows the faith of the Seven, right? Like 7 hells. But it also describes exactly how Ser Steffon sees this dragon, which he believes is an actual god. The female Dragonkeeper tells Ser Steffon to not show fear, and she shouts, and he repeats the word "Ribas," which translates to a listen form of obey. Like, you listen to me and obey. Seasmoke lowers his head and Ser Steffon approaches, but then he turns to look at Seasmoke, who turns his head back to Ser Steffon and flips open his eyelids. I think that was the first mistake. The second was Steffon relaxing his posture as Seasmoke was watching him and speaking in the common language this.
I've done it.
Shifting from Valyrian to what the dragon would hear as the ugly language makes this man sound like a pest, and she gives him a big fat Dracarys. It's awful to see this happen to Ser Steffon, who has only ever been a good and loyal knight. I think this underlies the mistake of overvaluing legal ancestry in the laws of man and not fully appreciating the outlook of dragons who occupy a state of nature. Steffon tries to stop, drop, and roll, but the other Dragonkeeper is totally ready for this and goes right for a knife to end his own pain. I assume all the Dragonkeepers have knives like this, ready to go in case this happens. I am fascinated by these Dragonkeepers, their robes, their whoopsie knives, and what I assume are their choir rehearsals, because all of them were singing on key, the same melody, no one attempting to do a harmony like you hear in your church choirs, and none of them were flat, like they know the importance of a good sounding lullaby to these dragons. But we leave Seasmoke's rejection of Steffon and transition to Addam of Hull, tying knots in Driftmark as he watches his brother Alyn approached by Corlys. Alyn says that the blockade will be challenged by lions or krakens, referring to Lannisters or Greyjoys coming from the west coast of the continent, showing how the Velaryons are assuming Alicent's and Orwyle's plans to pursue naval support from the west coast, so Aemond was right to think about the Triarchy. Alyn is covering his head with his wrap, and it's because, we will see later, he is not bald naturally, he shaves his head to hide any silver Valyrian hair that he would be growing. He doesn't want people to know he's Corlys' son, worried that they'll think his achievements are the result of special treatment. Geology has been sponsoring us for over 2 years, which is crazy because that means I've been a daily geology user for 2 years now. When we started, I thought, sure, I'll take some free face wash and shampoo from work, why not? But then I started noticing smoother, more hydrated skin, fewer blemishes, and less oilness. Do you have any idea how much footage of myself I need to watch at this job? I notice these things. And now over 3,000 of our viewers have also made geology part of their daily routine. They've shared reviews with us saying things like, the products are easy to use and definitely have a real impact on the look and feel of your hair and skin. Highly recommend. And also, not a skincare guy, well, at least I wasn't. This stuff is amazing and the products are top notch. Want to see for yourself? Just click the link in the description below, take a quick 30-second quiz, and Geology will figure out your routine for you. Just click the link in the description below to get 90% off your first skincare trial set and 20% off your next full-sized order, or go to geolog.ie/rockstars90x20 to get started. But now there's this interesting scene in the pub with Ulf the White, Diana, the former maid in the Red Keep whom Aegon assaulted and Alicent gave the moon tea to, and Sylvie, the madam from the brothel that Aemond likes to hook up with. So remember, Mysaria sent Elinda to King's Landing to meet with Diana, and now it seems like that plan was to get all these people talking. And Sylvie is part of this gossip campaign to get everyone real pissed off the Greens over the food situation. Maybe to even do this with Ulf within earshot, as I'm sure he's told plenty of people that he was the bastard son of Balon, father to Viserys and Daemon. Sylvie says extra loud,
"They're banqueting every night at the castle, while we go without."
That can't be true.
Diana's response sounds a bit scripted, right? Like they rehearsed this. Sylvie claims that her girls were brought to the Red Keep, feasting and merriment for Aemond, with racks of lamb, mince pies, honey cakes, beef, and gravy. But we know this isn't true. Sylvie would know that Aemond only has one type of sex worker he likes to get with, and that's her. And he's definitely not the kind of royal who likes having big parties. Ulf brings up Viserys, and Sylvie says,
Aye, but he's gone now, and his rightful heir denied her seat.
this would be a dangerous thing for Sylvie to say out loud in King's Landing to a stranger, so Diana must have heard him before when he called Rhaenyra the rightful heir, before suddenly changing his tune when Aegon walked in. Rhaenyra cast Bartimos Celtigar in an Australian family drama.
It is my fault, I think, that you have forgotten to fear me.
So Bartimos is going on and on about appealing to Lord Mouton to retake Rook's Rest. Later, she will actually tell Jace that she did send word to Lord Wallace Mouton to proceed, so she wasn't fully tuning out Bartimos. She just didn't like his tone and his use of the word spectacle to describe Rhaenyra sending in Rhaenys and Meleys, because Bartimos originally joined the chorus of those at the table begging her to deploy dragons. It wasn't just for show, it was a practical strategy that just did not work out for them. As Rhaenyra lamented to Mysaria about not being raised male and knowing the difference between hilt and foible, now she wields swords that have been laid out for her, and the pommel of this sword has dragon wings, similar to the Balerion wings on the hilt of Dark Sister. Mysaria reports that their Goss train has left the station.
They are hungry, and they need someone to blame.
Will it be enough?
Yeah, they kind of sounded like Cyrax in the background. Rhaenyra's dragon, like the dragon is now excited to hear that King's Landing is turning pro Rhaenyra. Hugh Hammer's wife, Kat, was one of the last in line before the food ran out. Hightower men cart sheep past.
Got enough sheep for your dragons then, but none for us.
So he must know that these sheep are headed for Vhagar in Dreamfire, because the cart would be headed toward the Dragon Pit in King's Landing instead of toward the Red Keep. But that's even more insulting, that this isn't going to one of Aemond's big sex parties, but instead just to feed the beasts. You'll notice the small council chamber is far less crowded now. It's just Aemond and Larys and Ironrod. Alicent was removed. Orwyle is tending to Aegon. Sir Tyland is figuring out how to break the blockade in the gullet by probably reaching out to the Triarchy. And Sir Criston is readying his host to march north to Harrenhal. Larys thinks Aemond is offering him the role of hand to the king, but it's a cruel fake out by Aemond, who orders Larys to just fetch Grandpa Otto instead. But just as Aemond moves to consolidate his power, Orwyle enters.
I am happy to report that His Grace the King has regained consciousness this morning, if only for a few moments.
You said there was little hope.
And suddenly Aemond is very nervous, and he looks over at Larys and he's like, I bet you're real happy about this. And then he sees Orwyle grab an attendance ball and thinks, hey, this thing I've been playing with in my hands all meeting as like kind of a stress ball, I might actually be able to use this. So Aemond gets Aegon alone and he asks him what he remembers. Aegon says nothing, but just to make sure that this king ain't gonna snitch, Aemond presses the king's attendance ball into his wound. Why would a spherical marble ball and not one of those scary iron chisels that we saw last episode be used to hurt him? Well, this would be one item he can afford to be seen having in his hand, even if the idiotic Sir Leon Estermont is right over by the door and doesn't seem to bat an eye at this scary psycho leading over the king. Aegon's wounds are rough in this episode, and it kind of looks like some scar tissue maybe like gluing over one of his eyes, which if it does make it so that he can only see out of one eye, it kind of sets him up to have this interesting parallel with his one-eyed brother. Rhaena and Joffrey walk past some bleating sheep off screen until they come upon the burnt sheep bones and several sheep carcasses burnt to a crisp. She later watches the young boys Aegon the Younger and Viserys, these are Rhaenyra's sons with Daemon, play with Aegon's hatchling dragon Stormcloud, who is real small, like smaller than he would be at this point in the book, which is important they'll get to later. But Lady Jane reports that the three of them have been welcomed by Prince Reggio of Pentos, who we saw dining with Daemon and Lena in season 1 episode 6 when they lived in Pentos. Rhaena calls out Lady Jane though.
There is a large dragon in the Vale.
Lady Jane says that the dragon was ranging more broadly for food.
It is large and formidable, but alas wild.
Alas.
After Iron Rod on the small council chamber, another use of the word alas to just indicate, I know there's more you're not saying out loud. Lady Jane says that the ship called the Gay Abandon will take them to Pentos, and that is the name of the ship that takes Aegon the Younger and Viserys toward Pentos in Fire and Blood. But we have more to discuss about this particular voyage and this mystery wild dragon and how it likes to steal sheep in the spoiler dungeon. So we learned that the final stroke of Rhaenyra and Mysaria's plan was to send unmanned boats with food and Rhaenyra's red and black banners. In every possible way, it's an inverse to what the Greens are providing the small folk. Instead of weapons of fire from above who drain the food supply, these are peaceful vessels from the water below that provide food and hope. Orwyle tells Alicent that Aegon sleeps most of the day now, but Aegon might actually be sleeping because Aemond scared the shit out of him and out of Orwyle. And now Orwyle is like, hey, why don't you take quite a bit of milk of the poppy, because if you start to recover too fast and become too alert, Aemond's gonna come in here and make you eat your attendance ball. Orwyle reports,
House Beesbury has raised arms against the High Tower host.
Again, Lyman, dear me, Beesbury had his skull crushed in by one of these attendance balls, and his house hasn't forgiven the Greens for that. Orwyle says, retribution for their lord's demise, and he looks at Aegon before the word demise, remembering how it was one of those deadly, deadly attendance balls that caused it, and he's just as worried about one of them hurting Aegon. Gwayne and Alicent haven't heard from their father Otto. At this point in Fire and Blood, Otto actually did not leave King's Landing after Aegon replaced him with Ser Criston, but his brother Lord Ormond, whom we met in season 1 episode 3, leads a host of men from Old Town, but runs into Alyn Beesbury and Alan Tarley, the Alan's Alliance. And Ormond ends up writing to Otto saying, wow, we need your dragons. So Alicent asks about her fourth child, Daeron, who's been warding in Old Town, and Gwayne leads by saying that he's a stalwart, adept in his lute and his sword, popular with the ladies, but then he senses what his sister is really asking about.
He's kind.
That's good. Kindness is a quality I found lacking in his brothers.
After raising her boys to be everything else, she forgot to teach them how to be kind, but I also think she was not capable of doing so. She has never really shown true kindness, in my opinion, just kind of ambition and obedience to her father. Really, the kindness in that marriage came from Viserys. Viserys was actually the kinder of the two. Alicent finds her daughter Helena playing with her bugs.
This one stopped singing.
Another possibly prophetic bug moment from Helena. Why would you ever describe a cricket as singing? That could be a clue, because in this era of Westeros, a song also refers to the way you would recount history. Basically, the stories of ages past. We refer to those as songs. So what really ended here is someone who would be passing that history on. But the fact that these crickets are in cages could just be a reference to a silenced dragon in a cage, but I also think it could be a silenced person. Maybe Aegon's current silence, or the silence of their son Jaehaerys. But again, more on this in the spoiler dungeon. Alicent says,
I thought we might light a candle for Aegon and all our lost souls.
Alicent cannot bring herself to say Jaehaerys' name, but I think she also wants to light a candle for all the family that she's lost, either through death or these new personal beefs. Hugh Hammer finds his dog. I think this is Cheese's dog. And didn't I pray to the gods in episode 2 that Hugh Hammer and Cheese Dog could become best friends? Then again, Hugh probably just wanted to eat this thing. Rhaenyra's food boats have caused a Black Friday rush that spreads to the sept. The candles that Alicent and Helena light flicker in the wind from the door being thrown open, reminding us of the foreboding wind that blew the Dragon Dragonkeeper's torch. And again, Alys Rivers' winds are changing, and Alicent's prayer is interrupted. The senior Kingsguard, who I think is Sir Rickard Thorne, just based on the seniority and the fact that he's the only one on the Westeros Wikia who seemed to have an actor cast for the role, he has to instruct all the other Kingsguard to mind their corners, because these others are the idiotic lickspittle of Sir Leon, Sir Martin, and Sir Eddard, Aegon's drinking buddies. Uh-oh. One townie calls Alicent the Queen of Fishes, and food fights some sashimi right in Sir Criston's second favorite kissing spot, and Helaena falls behind, and Alicent trips. Helaena covers her ears as a defense mechanism, and we saw this mannerism from Via Saban back in season 1. Now, this random guy comes up, and initially we don't know if he's attacking or trying to help Alicent with her footing, but he says, "My queen," and everyone else in this mob is saying, "Queen of Fishes, long live Queen Rhaenyra, I hate your freaking guts." So I'm pretty sure this guy was just a nice helping hand to Alicent, but then one of these Sir Lickspittles, Sir Leon Estermont, chops the guy's arm off. Alicent orders to sheathe their swords, and then there's this brief shot where the three Sir Lickspittles stooge into each other again. Alicent and Helaena are pressed into a very, very scary trellis with pointed knobs. Probably for like hanging garments or other items for sale, but just, you know, remember this. Alicent and Helaena make it to the wheelhouse, but Sir Leon Estermont gets tackled by the crowd as Sir Eddard Waters and Sir Martin Rain panic over him. I'm impressed that this mob knew which of these three idiots was the one who cut the arm off, despite all three knights dressed the same and helmeted. This crowd is good at, like, you know, the 3-card Monty game, I'm sure. Only Sir Rickard makes it to the wheelhouse, and then all three Sir Lickspittles are left behind, including Sir Martin Rain. So hearing the Rains of Castamere at the beginning of this episode was quite appropriate. Larys Strong meets with the alien Aegon and denies him milk of the poppy that was prescribed by Orwyle, but really just because Larys needs the king to recover and be sharp as a tack. He delivers some hard truths, that Aegon will never run again and he will never be whole, and we're reminded of the kindness that Tyrion Lannister shows Bran Stark.
I have a tender spot in my heart for cripples, bastards, and broken things.
Larys says,
I came screaming into the world in the bowels of one of Harren's great towers. My father named it sorcery, accusing a member of our household of casting malign spells.
He must be referring to Alys Rivers, who in Fire and Blood is a bastard of Larys' father Lionel, who also serves as a wet nurse to Larys. But in the show, for Alys Rivers to be perhaps over 400 years old, she must have not been Lionel's bastard, but perhaps she was still a wet nurse to the Strong family. And just a reminder that if she wet nursed Larys, she also wet nursed Breakbones, who is a father to Jace and a Joffrey. So she has had an influence in this family in various ways. Larys says Lionel accused Alys of sorcery, but I don't know if Larys shares that resentment or even that belief. I think he more so resents his father for judging his condition as a curse. While I don't think sorcery had a role in Larys' condition the moment he was born, I do think he grew up with Alys counseling him and maybe grew an appreciation for her ways and her links to the natural world. Daemon the Dreamer finds himself back in a dream/memory with Viserys, but not a memory because he was not there for this. This is the moment when Viserys was sobbing over the body of Emma with the Silent Sisters waiting off to the side. It kind of seems like they might have gotten Sean Brooke back for this. We did not see this in season 1 because Daemon was not there for it. He just wishes he was. And it's so sad to see him kiss his brother on the back of the head. And because Daemon now finally seems haunted not by something he was there for, but by something he knows deep down in his heart that he should have been there for, it seems to have a different effect when he wakes up in the morning light. Sir Simon reports that Lord Grover Tully at Riverrun is finally dead, and Oscar Tully, the kid that he talked to before, is now Lord Paramount of the Riverlands. Now there is a tipped goblet beside him, so this probably was more of Alys's drugging, but overall, this has been the gentlest wake up he's gotten yet. It looks like he finally listened to Alys and he did the right thing, which was just nothing other than just reflect on his sins. And by doing so, he was rewarded. But Sir Simon does hint that there might have been some literal foul play here.
Riverrun's maesters have been at their wits' end. Our own healer, Alys Rivers, volunteered her renowned skills.
So, like Arya waiting for Jaqen H'ghar to fulfill his promise at Harrenhal, Daemon is now rewarded by Alys delivering for him. And we're just kind of left assuming that she physically made it happen. Maybe she stuffed an attendance ball in his mouth. And I love how Daemon just sobs with relief, still in that emotional state of holding his brother. And it kind of feels like an Ebenezer Scrooge sob of relief at the end of A Christmas Carol. Seasmoke swoops down on Addam of Hull. It's really cool how we stay in one shot for several swings of the camera, because Seasmoke totally would have been a VFX added later, but they choreographed the camera to know where he would be. Addam thinks that he's lost the dragon, and he sees his flapping bird in the sun, which distracts us long enough for the always hilarious gag of a dragon jump scare, which, given their size, should be impossible. But could this bird be one of the spies of Alys Rivers? Does she know about this as well? While Addam braces for death, when the dragon does not torch him, Addam begins to relax and sense a bond forming. So how does this work? As a bastard of Corlys Velaryon along with Alyn, Addam does have Valyrian blood, but Corlys was not a dragon rider. The Velaryons do have Valyrian blood, but they are not dragon riders. Only Targaryens are, at least in the book. Rhaenys was a dragon rider because she was a Targaryen, and then her kids, Laenor and Laena, were because their mother was Rhaenys, and they were Targaryens as well that way. Now in the book, Addam and Alyn are implied to be Laenor's sons, which could be why Addam can bond with Seasmoke. But on the HBO series, it seems like they're just related to Corlys, which would make them only Velaryons and have no Targaryen lineage, but they would have Valyrian bloodline, and maybe on the show, they're saying whether you're Targaryen or Velaryon, that's Valyrian enough to be a dragon rider. Rhaenyra and Mysaria discuss in the same chamber where Rhaenyra and Daemon had it out before he fled Dragonstone, and that's what's on her mind now. She says that she wishes she was born a man, and with Emma Darcy identifying as non-binary, I feel like that might have factored into some of the writing of the scene. Mysaria reveals that her scar on her neck came from an abusive father who impregnated her and left her unable to bear children. She tells Rhaenyra that she deserves to be the queen, and Rhaenyra, feeling validation for the first time in ages, hugs her and then makes out with her. So Rhaenyra and Mysaria do not have a romantic relationship in Fire and Blood. This is new to the show, and I do remember reading that Millie Alcock and Emily Carey hinted that they played their scene in the Godswood in the pilot episode with a bit of a flirty energy. I actually like this show exploring this side to Rhaenyra's character, but I was talking with Gina Ippolito, who helps write all of these House of the Dragon breakdowns, and we kind of have some mixed thoughts about this. Like, I totally understand Rhaenyra has needs, and Mysaria finally made her feel seen. We just also, at the same time, would have loved to explore just a true female friendship on this series. And on HBO, it sometimes feels like sex is the only part of adult relationships. Like, yes, it is a part, a very big part, but it's not the only part. But in shows like Game of Thrones and House of the Dragon, it's all sex, because it's not TV, it's HBO. Dear me. Really, I think I just have issues with the way they're writing the Mysaria character, from having some agency in season 1 to back into bondage for season 2, and now later in season 2, her best idea so far to be starting a gossip train and floating fruit baskets, and now she's just kind of serving as a tool for Rhaenyra to explore her sexual appetites, and by the end of the episode, I suppose to get her blood pumping, to take her dragon out for a ride. And really it just comes after this moment where the writers are using scars as character development. Like, doing that was cool for Heath Ledger's Joker, which is really more for the way he refused to tell how he actually got the scars, but using scars for character development has since evolved into something screenwriters consider to be an overdone trope. So much so that the British Film Institute in 2018 stopped funding films in which villains' faces are scarred. Like, I think everyone has had enough of this. Anyway, I've been ranting too long. Rhaenyra learns that Seasmoke has a new rider and she takes Syrax out to investigate, and a little detail in these final moments, as she marches down the walkway, you can see ashes billowing off. These would be the ashes, all that is left of Ser Steffon. Okay, let's end in the spoiler dungeon with plot details from Fire and Blood that might get addressed in upcoming episodes. Okay, Dalton Greyjoy, the Red Kraken. It's ironic that Alicent and Orwyle think that he might be more trustworthy than the Triarchy, because after they offer him Master of Ships in Fire and Blood, the Blacks also try to recruit him, but they just tell him, hey, just attack our enemies for us. And Dalton's like, okay. And then he just chooses to raid the nearby Westerlands, with Jason Lannister away defending the Riverlands. And then the Red Kraken burns Lannisport, but the Free Cities are also gonna end up pretty vicious in the Gullet with the Triarchy. They're gonna attack High Tide after the Battle of Gullet. So Alan's line in this episode about Corlys would rather see High Tide claimed by the sea, there's a lot of pirate madness ahead. So spoiler 2, Ser Criston is headed back to Harrenhal, and Aemond says that he will join him with Vhagar when the time is right. This might be the last time Ser Criston and Alicent see each other. Not because something bad's gonna happen to Ser Criston, but because something bad may happen to Alicent by the end of the season. In Fire and Blood, this campaign ends with Aemond finding Harrenhal empty, and with Vhagar no longer in King's Landing, the city is undefended, and Rhaenyra and Syrax are gonna take King's Landing. That could be where we end the season, but as a bittersweet victory for Rhaenyra because of what I think is gonna happen in episode 7. Spoiler 3, I think episode 7, next week, we're gonna gonna see the Battle of the Gullet. It's clear to me now that the sowing of the seeds and the dragon seeds is just going down a bit differently than it does in the book. Like in the book, they're just throwing like body after body at the dragons, and here they just seem to represent that all in Ser Steffon. And actually, Addam of Hull may be the only new writer we see in action in these final 2 episodes. And maybe Hugh Hammer and Ulf the White will bond with Vermithor and Silverwing respectively sometime after that, like maybe in the final scene of the season, just because they are not anywhere close to Dragonstone yet. But so much of this episode was focused on the Gullet blockade, and I think Jace on Vermax and Addam on Seasmoke are gonna get involved when bad stuff starts happening over the water to avenge the gay abandon and to defend Corlys and Alyn on a Velaryon ship as the Triarchy is attacking, and Jace and Vermax are gonna go down. Okay, spoiler 4, Rhaena and Sheepstealer. Okay, perhaps this is the biggest change from the book, and I don't know about you guys, but I'm not crazy about it. The show establishes the brown dragon known as Sheepstealer to be in the Vale, but in the book, Sheepstealer is a wild dragon on Dragonstone, and they tried to bond Sheepstealer with all kinds of folks, including Addam of Hull, but Sheepstealer refuses all of them and ends up bonding with a young woman named Nettles, and Nettles is awesome, a true fan favorite character, but now the show seems to have erased Nettles and reassigned Sheepstealer to Rhaena, which is surprising to me because Rhaena was given 4 dragon eggs, and we know 3 of them are going to become Daenerys' eggs, so I just assumed that 4th one was going to hatch into her pink she-dragon Morning. I don't know if that's the case anymore. It seems like we're going to see Sheepstealer find Rhaena and present to her the way that Seasmoke did to Addam. It just sucks to lose Nettles though, but hey, maybe the show can introduce the character in a different way in season 3. Okay, spoiler 5, Pentos and the Gay abandon. So in Fire and Blood, this boat gets attacked by the Triarchy. Aegon the Younger escapes by clinging to Stormcloud, and Viserys ends up getting kidnapped. Both do end up surviving and becoming kings, but they go on a pretty wild journey. But in this episode, Stormcloud was way too small to fly, or to have a boy bigger than him cling to him as he flies. So I don't know, I think these kids are gonna end up truly lost at sea on very different paths from the book. Okay, spoiler 6, Reed taking Rook's Rest. Bartimos Calcigar and Rhaenyra brought up Lord Mouton trying to retake Rook's Rest for the Blacks, but this is gonna fail, as Sunfire is still there, grounded but still very, very deadly, and takes out Lord Mouton's very small force. Okay, finally, spoiler number 7, Helena's cricket who stopped singing. Could this be herself? In Fire and Blood, she loses it after the death of Jaehaerys, and after the battle above the God's Eye, and after the death of Aemond, she leaps out of her window and dies on the spikes below. And I feel like we nearly got that with that spiky wall outside the sept this episode. They didn't look that spiky, but you know, there's been some like coat hooks on walls that I've leaned against too hard, and I thought I might die. Comment down below with your thoughts on this episode, and a big thanks to Brandon Barrick and Gina Ippolito for helping write this breakdown. Follow me at EA Voss, subscribe to all 3 channels of the New Rockstars Network for breakdowns and news coverage of everything you love. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.